We've probably all heard a joke or quip about the Irish and their love of potatoes. The link is so strong that the versatile vegetable has become synonymous with the Emerald Isle. However, there is a dark and harrowing history behind Ireland's dependence on the potato, and it might make you think twice before laughing at an Irish potato pun in the future. Join us as we uncover the truth behind the Irish potato famine. Potatoes are not actually native to Ireland. They were first brought to Europe by the Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s. Despite now being a dietary staple all over the world, potatoes didn't make a huge impact on European cuisine at first. Not only did Europeans fail to embrace the tasty tuber, but they also treated it with suspicion due to it being a member of the nightshade family, which was associated with witches and devils. The potato first caught on in Spain during the 16th century, and despite a popular myth about Sir Walter Raleigh first introducing the root vegetable to Ireland, historians believe it was more likely to have been introduced from Spain. In 1657, a London author named William Coles wrote, "The potatoes, which we call Spanish because they were first brought to us from Spain, grew originally in the Indies." The story about Raleigh planting potatoes at his Irish estate in Youghal probably stems from England's rivalry with Spain and a desire not to credit Spain with the introduction of such a useful crop. Another anecdotal story that begrudgingly attributes the introduction of the potato to Spain is that it was washed up on the shores of Cork from the wreck of a Spanish ship after the Spanish Armada was defeated. Ireland began to embrace the potato during the 18th century when it became a staple food for the poor. The tuber thrived due to the soil and the climate, and Irish peasants soon relied on it for its nutritional value. The success of the potato was also linked to the political climate in Ireland and Ireland's tumultuous history with England. The first raids on Ireland from England were in the form of Anglo-Norman invasions in the 1100s. In 1171, Henry II landed a large army in Ireland due to a suspicion that his generals were amassing there. By 1175, he had gained control of most of the island. In the 13th century, an English colony was established in Dublin but failed to extend or exert power significantly. By the middle of the 14th century, Ireland was back under Irish control. During the 15th century, the English crown was essentially too weak to dominate Ireland. However, in the 16th century, Ireland came back onto the radar of the English monarchies. When Henry VIII broke with Rome in 1534, he made an enemy of much of Catholic Europe, and Ireland became a potential launchpad for a French or Spanish invasion. Ireland became the focus of English attacks, and in 1541, Henry VIII was declared King of Ireland. After Henry's death, England was determined to keep its interests in Ireland alive. Queen Elizabeth I was more concerned with the cost of protecting these interests, though. Her relaxed policies in Ireland led to three significant rebellions against English rule, those of Shane O'Neill in 1559, the Fitzgeralds from 1568 to 1583, and O'Neill and O'Donnell from 1594 to 1603. Under James I, who was Protestant like Elizabeth, Irish policy was bent to the benefit of the English nobles, leading to many Irish soldiers and leaders emigrating to Roman Catholic countries in Europe. Their departure gave rise to further English settlement, and from 1609, Protestants from England and Scotland were encouraged to move to the north of Ireland to support James's rule. The arrival of Protestant farmers was known as the Plantation of Ulster, and in order to financially support the scheme, companies and landowners from London were offered huge tracts of land in exchange for funding. One rich London merchant company, called the Mercer's Company, was given over 21,000 acres of land, and, as such, played a significant role in the newly formed County Londonderry. The main issue with this was that the land had been taken from the local Irish population. The native population was pushed into marginal landholdings with less arable land and replaced with tenant farmers from Scotland and England. By the early 1700s, a series of laws was put in place designed to restrict the rights of Irish Catholics. These included regulations against educating children, bearing arms, owning a horse worth more than £5, and denying Catholics the vote. Laws were also made that prohibited Catholics from buying land, inheriting land from Protestants, and taking out leases that were longer than 31 years. These penal laws had the desired effect of plunging the Irish Catholic population into poverty. With limited space and resources, Irish peasants found that potatoes were both easy to grow and calorific enough to sustain them. In the late 1700s, it was documented that young Irish men consumed around 11 pounds of potatoes per capita per day. The British reaction to the Irish Rebellion of 1798 did not help the situation. The British government decided they would have to form a union, and the Irish Parliament was abolished in 1801. Instead, Ireland would be represented in the Parliament of Westminster in London. Although Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger argued that the union would strengthen the connection between England and Ireland, as well as provide economic opportunities for Ireland, the Irish Parliament fiercely opposed the move. The motion was passed nevertheless, as the British government paid cash and bestowed honors in exchange for votes. Although nothing much changed for the Irish, it meant that the Irish government representatives could no longer pass laws on their own. During the late 1700s, the Industrial Revolution led to a population boom across Europe. In Ireland, this was fueled by the Irish linen industry. As the population increased, so did the poor's dependence on potatoes as a primary food source. This reliance was also due to the fact that other crops and livestock were largely being exported and sold in the British market. Although the repressive penal laws were repealed in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the damage had already been done. English and Anglo-Irish families now owned most of the land. In contrast, Irish Catholics could only rent land and work as tenant farmers or farm laborers. In addition, although the harsher penal laws had been abolished, they were replaced with the Poor Law in 1838, which required any able-bodied peasants without legitimate employment to be sent to workhouses. By the 1840s, around half of the Irish population was exclusively dependent on potatoes for their diet. The majority of this number was made up of the rural poor, many of whom were cottiers, landless workers who lived and worked on tenant farms and were permitted to keep their own small plots on which they had to grow enough crops to sustain themselves and their families. The best vegetable in this situation was potatoes, as a single acre could yield up to 6 tons of potatoes, enough to feed a family for a year. The large variety of potatoes available had been whittled down to a couple of high-yielding crops, leading to a lack of genetic diversity that unknowingly left the Irish vulnerable to crop failure on a colossal scale. This vulnerability was exposed in 1845 when a strain of water mold, Phytophthora infestans, arrived in Ireland from North America. Initial reports of a mysterious potato blight in America and then parts of Europe were met with interest rather than trepidation. The first signs of the blight entering the United Kingdom were noted in the Isle of Wight and Kent in August of 1845. By August 20th, the blight was seen in Dublin, and by September, reports of the disease were widespread throughout Ireland. As 1845 was unusually cold and damp, even for Ireland, the mold thrived, causing potatoes to rot in the field. In addition, the weak plants were then susceptible to other fungi and bacteria that produced rotting once the potatoes were pulled. As the scale of the issue became apparent, Irish leaders petitioned Queen Victoria and Parliament to intervene. The British Parliament decided the best course of action was to keep exporting corn from Ireland but allow for free trade by repealing the Corn Laws, which imposed heavy tariffs on imported grain. Although this lowered the price of bread and grain, many of Ireland's poor still did not have enough money to benefit from the reduction in price. While those in urban areas fared slightly better, in rural regions, Irish tenant farmers and cottiers had no time to recoup the loss of their food source, and they began to die of starvation in the thousands. By 1846, the majority of the potato supplies were gone, and the following year's crop also failed, leading to more starvation and diseases such as typhus, scurvy, and dysentery. The British totally underestimated the scale of the disaster. To make things worse, the measures they put in place were woefully inadequate, with many Irish not receiving any aid at all. Instead of stopping the exportation of grain, meat, and other nutritious foods from Ireland, the English put the onus on the landowners, requiring them to provide for their starving tenants. However, as many of the peasants were now too weak and sick to work on the farms, they were unable to pay their rent and were evicted. The Irish peasantry's reliance on cornmeal imported from America resulted in nutritional deficiencies, and as its grounding process was so poor, it also caused abdominal pain and diarrhea. Although Britain spent over £8 million on relief, it was hardly enough. The British helped to fund soup kitchens, provided loans, and provided employment on road building and other public works to try and help support the Irish. all the while profiting from the export of quality foods and crops. Some research has suggested that exports of butter and livestock actually increased during the potato famine. The starving Irish farm workers could not afford to buy the food they were producing. By August of 1847, around 3 million Irish were relying on rations at soup kitchens. The same year, the British continued to export peas, beans, rabbits, fish, and honey from the ravaged country. The Great Famine cemented resentment of British rule in the Irish people. In Britain, many were completely unaware of the crisis, and even English visitors to large Irish cities, which were largely unaffected by the disaster, had no idea of what was happening in rural Ireland. Worse still, those who did know were so prejudiced against the Irish that many believed the crisis was either God punishing the Catholics for their sins, the outcome of high birth rates, or inherent flaws in the character of the Irish people. By 1851, Ireland's population had dropped from around 8.4 million to 6.6 million. In the end, around 1 million people had died from starvation and disease brought on by malnutrition, while 2 million Irish emigrated to escape the ongoing disaster. Between 1841 and 1850, the Irish made up just under half of the emigrants that arrived in the United States, while others headed for Australia and Britain. Although the potato crops had recovered by 1852, the Irish population hadn't, and they continued to emigrate, which significantly lowered birth rates in the country. Even today, the population in Ireland has not reached what it was in the 19th century. Those who remained in Ireland had a renewed passion for Irish independence, and there was a rise in fierce nationalism in the country. Many still perceive the potato famine to be a natural disaster. However, as we now know, the truth is much more harrowing and sinister. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Irish potato famine, check out our book, The Great Famine, a captivating guide to the history of the Great Hunger in Ireland from 1845 to 1849 and how the potato famine was solved. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.